friends and members of St. Mark's Lutheran Church in Wilmington, Delaware. We're glad you're viewing us, and we have a very special guest today, one many of you may know, and will know better when we're done here, and that's Rob Gurnee, the Executive Director of Lutheran Community Services here in Wilmington and Northern Delaware. Are you beyond that these days?
No, we're just exclusively in Delaware, that's correct.
So welcome again, and we'll see what Ron has to say. And good morning, Ron.
Thank you, Dave.
Ron, just tell us a little bit about yourself and
Sure.
how you got to this point.
Absolutely. Well, it's been a journey like most things in life, right? If you'd had asked me 20 or 30 years ago if this is what I'd be doing, the answer would certainly not have come into my mind. But I grew up in Wilmington, went to Brandywine High School, and went to college in D.C., went to law school in Atlanta, and you know, like a lot of folks that age, I wasn't really formed in my identity, and so I sort of followed in my father's footsteps, and I went into banking and finance. Had a very successful career for a long time, and about 15 years ago, I made the change to nonprofit. I helped with a startup in Wilmington, in West Center City, very distressed neighborhood. We stood up a governance council there and helped get some funding and helped move that neighborhood along with a strategic plan that's still going to this day. Then I went and worked at the University of Pennsylvania and ran a nonprofit on their campus. It was part campus ministry, part social justice and service in West Philadelphia. And then I came to LCS about 3 years ago. Brought with me, you know, those business skills and sort of the administrative and executive set of skills, but married it with, you know, sort of my heart for justice and my heart for service. So
excellent.
Yeah.
You know, it begs a question for me, Rob. I guess I hadn't known that you were a Wilmingtonian and about all the elements of your history. As you say, 15 years ago, you helped set up in the West Side. Mm-hmm. Can you observe at all, at least in a general sense, how Wilmington has changed in those years?
You know, I don't know that it's changed an awful lot. Here's the sad part almost, is 15 years ago when I was involved in that work in West Center City, I thought that I was on the cutting edge of change, and I was on the first one to be thinking of some issues and to working and to be striving. And folks there were telling me, gosh, we've been doing this work for so long. Mm-hmm. We've been doing it for so long. And here, fast forward 15 years, and all that's going on in our country, all that we're seeing now in terms of the disparities and social justice issues, you realize that, you know, the struggle continues. There's been incremental progress, for sure. There's an awareness, and there's, you know, more resources, perhaps, working towards helping improve things. But in large part, the struggle is still there, man. The struggle is still there.
I guess I was also thinking, because I was on the, what committee was it? Personnel committee at Sojourner's Place, and years ago, 20 years ago. And the issues that we were confronting then were largely financial and how to keep the funding coming and all that. And MB&A was a large supporter of Sojourner's Place. And I have no idea. I've been out of that loop for quite some time.
That landscape has changed. You know, it was the DuPont, then it was NBNA, and there is no large entity now that just sort of floats nonprofits. It's and there are a lot of nonprofits, and we're all sort of, you know, looking for support. We're looking for volunteers. We're looking for board members. So it's a bit of a challenging landscape. Fortunately, LCS is so well established and has such a loyal group of stakeholders that it creates a buffer a little bit from those choppy waters. So, but yeah, I'd say the nonprofit landscape has probably changed in the last 15 or 20 years in terms of funding.
Have the churches, particularly the Lutheran churches, and I know there are other churches that support you and have a connection with you, But have the Lutheran churches, and I don't mean this as any kind of a problem question, but have they been able to keep the support flowing?
They have. They have.
Excellent.
And it's really, it's very heartwarming. And, you know, I know churches can tend to face their own financial issues, certainly with size of congregations and even in this current environment. But the support is there, and it's a blessing.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear that. I believe that, and I remember the good old days. I was talking to somebody else about that. We were going back 35, 40 years about life here as Lutheran pastors. And at some level it was decidedly different. We crossed paths more frequently, especially at Lutheran Community Services and what was then the Martin Luther Foundation. And we were all on some kind of a board or committee and those kinds of things. And so can't help but wonder, now that I'm kind of back in a Wilmington loop of sorts, what's going on. So I'm very glad to hear that. Speaking of change, given COVID and all the assumptions around people being without food and rent and a number of other things, how has that influenced what you're doing and your capacity to do it, and are you keeping up with that? And
Well, not surprisingly, there's a great deal of need out there. So our two main program areas are emergency financial assistance and, of course, the network of food pantries. On the emergency financial assistance side, we have increased the amount of money that we've provided to help people with rent and with utility payments. It's more than quadrupled this year.
Really? Okay.
Absolutely. And you know, we administer those funds, and so fortunately we've been able to receive funds from the state of Delaware, from Delaware State Housing Authority, from the city of Wilmington, from Newcastle County, but the need is just dramatic. And typically in the past, we would help someone who had a viable budget, had some income, and maybe had just had an emergency in their life. And we would help them with a certain size check, maybe 1 month's rent or a utility bill. Now, of course, the emergency is the economic disruption that's occurred as a result of COVID. And so we are helping people who have been impacted by COVID, who've lost a job, perhaps gone from 2 wage earners down to no wage earners, and are just living off of unemployment. And so the amount of money that we're needing to provide folks to keep them afloat is greater, maybe providing 1 or 2 or 3 months rent in order to keep them out of that hole. So on the emergency financial assistance side, great need. Food side as well. I will tell you, on the food side, there's so many folks who are helping out in that arena. You know, the Food Bank of Delaware is doing a great job with large-scale food distributions. Churches have stepped up their games. Other nonprofits have. The federal government's provided maximized SNAP benefits, food stamp benefits, for a good period of this time. So folks, I feel like, more folks need food. But I feel like there are resources that are currently providing it. Now, when the spotlight goes away, right? When the benefits go away, we're going to still have a residual effect of folks who have been laid off, who are still struggling financially. And that's when I worry. Because that glut of resources will winnow down to just the usual players. And LCS is one of those stable, persistent players in the space,
The rental assistance program that I was familiar with years ago, that's a part of your
emergency financial assistance. We call it homelessness prevention.
Gotcha. Yep. Excellent. Is that on an individual basis? Do you go on the basis of what the actual need is of the person, or is there a standard amount? Or
no, prior to COVID, there was, our funders were very restrictive, but right now we're being allowed to really meet the need of the individual and the family. And so, as I said, we're able to provide sometimes up to 3 months' rent. Even if their income pre-COVID may have been a tad higher than previously allowed, because they have no income now, we're able to provide some funding.
Okay. I want to get to the walk-run here real quick, but is there, 'cause some of these people are not going to go, the jobs that they had will not be there. Is there a vocational rehab part of the process that's going on at all in Greater Wilmington?
There are a large number of nonprofits that pre-COVID and certainly now, given the current economic environment, whose mission it is to retrain folks, to provide vocational skills. And so that work is really critical at this point in time.
Oh, I would imagine.
Because as you say, a lot of these jobs may not come back. Some of these restaurants, small businesses, they were working on a thin safety net to begin with, and they just may not, survive, and it's a shame.
Which also, Rob, my understanding is that rental costs are extreme.
Yes, they are.
And I think I saw an ad, I went looking actually, and saw an ad that a one-bedroom apartment in Wilmington, Delaware is $650 or...
Oh gosh, it's more than that, Dave.
It is?
In the zip codes that we work in, which are, not affluent areas, a one-bedroom can be close to $1,000. And so, we've done a calculation that says in order for someone to be able to have some discretionary funds to meet the necessities of life, the basics of life, one should not really go over, let's say, 35% of their income, 30 to 35% of their income to be used towards housing expenses. In order to meet that threshold, if someone is working minimum wage, they'd have to work something like 70 or 80 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, not to go over that 30 or 35%.
Wow.
So what happens is they don't work that much, obviously, and instead they're at 50, 60, 70% of their income for housing, therefore leaving very little room for things like childcare, medicine, car repairs, you name it, right? So it's affordable housing really is a very important factor in the well-being of folks in our community.
Is the Interfaith Housing Task Force still working?
I know interfaith housing is still available. I'm not sure about that task force, to be candid with you.
Well, one of the things that I remember, and again, I'm sort of out of the loop on the particulars here, but the Habitat was very active, but is dreadfully slow.
And it's relatively small. I mean,
oh yeah. And the Interfaith Housing Group was building, complexes in various places where they could find both land and neighborhoods that were willing to accept them.
Right.
And as far as I remember, it was really doing a fairly decent job at that. And yet I don't, I see, look, I live in Landenberg and I drive past houses that, I get lost in. And I don't really believe that the housing is even being built.
There's a gap. There's a gap nationwide. I forget the number, but it's in the millions of units that are needed to meet the need. And there's some innovative approaches. There's Europe has got some interesting approaches where it's mixed use, as it were. So it's both retail and residential, and it's both market rate and subsidized. So what they do is they create a community that's diverse, and it seems to be working. A lot of times, affordable housing in this country, it tends to be put off in a corner, or it tends to be isolated, and it needs to be part of a more sustainable larger community. And that a lot of that has to go, goes beyond just financial consideration. It goes towards people's values and goes towards understanding of how we live in community and how we help one another. And,
Sure,
and that's
sure.
that's a heavy lift in today's environment.
I would imagine. I
Yeah.
would imagine. Okay, walk-run.
All
Going to be a little different this year, I
It
think.
is absolutely.
But it's going to happen.
It is going to happen.
Excellent.
So this would be our 29th annual walk-run, right? Which is tremendous. And all the proceeds of it go for our hunger program, for our food insecurity programming. But we're not going to gather this year, obviously. And so instead what we're doing is we're asking people to pick their own course, pick their own time, pick their own day.
Okay.
And have fun with it, Go out on a stroll somewhere, maybe wear a crazy shirt. Not that that's crazy.
Well, it's certainly that.
Or a shirt like this. This is our walk-run T-shirt. And take photos of yourself, take pictures of yourself, wear a silly mask, send them to us. We'll share it on social media. And then we are going to gather via Zoom on September 19th at 4 o'clock. And we're going to, still give out our prizes and still have a community celebration for what we've done. And this has been underway now for about a month.
Okay.
And we've got about 3 weeks more to go. And we're doing pretty well on our fundraising.
All right.
So I could give you a plug as to where to go.
Please do.
All right. If you want to go to our website, which is at lcsde.org, and just scroll down to the bottom of the page, and you'll see a link to the walk run, and you can donate, or you can support someone who has a team going, or you can create your own team. It's fun, it's easy, and it's for a good cause.
I know that from the past, and that included last year. Now, I can't really do all the physical things about that like I'd like to and like I used to, but it's just, in its physical sense, an opportunity for us all to get together under a common cause. And I am delighted that the creative juices have been flowing, and you can have, as best as we can do in the present situation, a sense of community, if only electronically, but also as people are doing what they're doing it not just in isolation, they're doing it in the context of helping Lutheran Community Services and being with their brothers and sisters in it. I can't help but say, we had to cancel a trip to Israel in February of 21. But anybody who thinks Jesus was a wimp needs to go there and see what it's like to traipse all over Palestine, in the Galilee and so forth and so on, with no other form of transportation but your feet.
Right.
Now, an interesting aside, this is completely an aside, but we had to put a donkey for Mary to get from Nazareth down to Bethlehem, because it was inconceivable that a pregnant woman in the latter stages of her pregnancy could walk.
Right.
There's no donkey in the text, but we helped her out,
Sure.
Everybody's image of the eve of Christ's birth is Mary silhouetted across a moonlight sky on a donkey. So I think you'd be okay if somebody like me, who can't run or walk like we used to, used a donkey.
Absolutely. Use a donkey. Use whatever you'd like,
I'll talk
Dave.
to my wife about that.
Do whatever you'd like. Absolutely.
Excellent. All right. What, Rob, to the extent that you can be prophetic, what do you perceive as the needs of the more long-term future, I guess, as it relates to the kinds of things your agency does?
Yeah. It's a little early to make a public pronouncement about it, but we're spending some time trying to shape a program with a major healthcare provider in Delaware that will really combine the best of our core competencies And it would be along the lines of like a food prescription pantry or a mobile food pharmacy, FARM,
Oh, okay,
right?
yeah.
Where maybe folks in their practice who have some comorbidities and are food insecure and need a very rigorous and comprehensive program to get on a better health trajectory, could be assigned or be given a script for food, which would be, all healthy, nutritious food, produce and fish and lean meats. And that would be combined with this healthcare provider doing some nutritional counseling and doing some weight loss management, and we would be providing food for the entire family, right? It does no good if the mom's healthy and the kids are eating cheeseburgers and what have you. And what it would allow us to do is to really provide a stable environment for folks to get healthy and to share with people some very specific outcomes. Like, we all know that the work that LCS currently does in terms of providing nutritious food is having a positive impact on folks. But to do it in the context of a partnership with a major healthcare provider, we're going to be able to show on an aggregate basis, improvements in cholesterol and improvements in blood pressure and improvements in all sorts of blood work that's related to their well-being around these comorbidities. So that's really, really exciting.
Oh, yeah.
We'll probably do a lot of it maybe with deliveries, so folks won't be constrained by limited pantry hours. And if they do come to us, we'll be open, maybe, a full day, 5 days a week. So again, they're not limited by hours. And really sort of change the way that we do food pantry in Delaware. So that's something that's on the horizon. That's pretty excited for us.
Well, that kind of networking is essential into the future.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we've through COVID, we've also learned some lessons. With our emergency financial assistance, typically folks would call into our office and they'd leave a message and we'd call them back and we'd do some phone screening, and then they would come into our office and maybe spend 45 minutes or an hour. And with COVID, we can't do that. And so we often wondered whether we could be able to do this sort of stuff remotely. And indeed we can. Right now, we ask folks to go to our website or give us their email address, and we'll send them an application. They'll take pictures of their documents. They'll take pictures of their bank statements, their pay stub. And we've been doing all of that work remotely, which frees us up to be able to do more, and frees them up to be able to do it out of their home, as opposed to having to make an appointment and traipse all the way across town.
Sure.
So little improvements as well, I think, are going to inure, to our success in the future going forward with things that we've learned from COVID.
What about smoking cessation? I quit 26 years ago, was a pipe smoker. But when I walk past a cigarette machine and see what those things cost these days, it's utterly amazing. And so, how's that program working? And does it do its job? And are you?
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned it. Yeah, smoking cessation. We are the pharmacy benefit manager for Delaware Quitline. So in that role, we help process free product for people. Delaware is one of the few states that provides the full range of products. So it's everything from lozenges and cough and drops to prescription. And the success rate for this program is, I'd say, in the high 30%, which is significantly better than the national average. And we have two types of ways that people can get involved. They can call an 800 number, and that's pretty good, and they get very attentive response. But in Delaware, we also have something called face-to-face coaching, where we have folks in healthcare settings, like at Christiana Hospital and some others, as well as folks that work in prisons, folks that work at community centers, and in our offices, in food pantries, where they identify someone who wants to quit smoking and they counsel them through a series of sessions.
Mm-hmm.
And the success rate on those are even higher.
Mm-hmm.
And so LCS administers, all the product that flows through to these folks. All the product is free, and not only is it providing great health benefits, it's also, if you think about it, a pack of a day smoker in Delaware, you're talking about $2,500 a year,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so you think about that in the context of our emergency financial assistance.
Exactly.
What could you use that $2,500 for
Mm-hmm.
other than, smoking?
Mm-hmm.
So that's been a successful program for us. We have a great partner in that, Optum Healthcare, and the state of Delaware.
Just in terms of staffing, do you find yourself, if you had the resources, what kind of additional staff would you like?
Yeah, I think that this healthcare initiative is going to perhaps get us some additional staff around being more intentional on measuring outcomes, and sort of tracking not only our activities, but the really sort of very specific outcomes. We do a lot of our work, Dave, with volunteers, as you
Sure.
know. We have, between our programs and our special events and our corporate partners, we have about 800 volunteers that help us every year.
Wow, yeah.
Which is fantastic. We've moved our volunteer coordinator from a part-time position to a full-time position during COVID,
Mm-hmm.
because what we saw was a lot of our traditional volunteers are older
Sure.
and retired, and we're feeling unsafe, quite frankly. And so we've really brought in and oriented and trained a whole new set of volunteers, and these are folks who've been laid off, who needed something to feel useful and wanted to give back, and so we've integrated them into our process. So we run a lot on volunteers. We can always use a staff person or two, like I said, in outcomes. Maybe if we'll probably need a dedicated resource to this mobile food pharmacy that we talked about. I'd like to expand our gardens. We can always use a person who works in there. So just growing sort of soundly and then putting the pieces in place that enable you to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I really appreciate what you're doing, and I believe I speak on behalf of St. Mark's Lutheran Church, which, at least in terms of the Walk-Run, has been pretty close to the top, if not the top of the heap, in terms of support and engagement and involvement and so forth.
Absolutely. St. Mark's is a wonderful supporter, and we've got some of your congregants who have teams going. Former pastor.
Fred.
Fred is always right at the top,
Yeah.
Which we greatly appreciate. He is just indefatigable when it comes to his pursuit of food security, and we appreciate that. And all the folks from St. Mark's who help us out.
Excellent.
Yeah. And you as well, Dave.
Well, for your information, Fred and I have pre-recorded an interview about world hunger and the ELCA's involvement with that, which will air later in September, because October is the month that emphasis is within the ELCA. So there are hungry people all over the globe, and we have agencies that are attempting to mitigate against some of that, and I think we can be very pleased that agencies like Lutheran Community Services, Lutheran Rural Relief, and any number of others are really very good at what they do, and I think that's apparent as we talk with Rob and others about these things. So, my friend, thanks for coming.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We look forward to a very successful walk-run. I may make about 2,000 trips around my living rooms.
We're Fitbit.
Yeah, okay, okay.
Dave,
Thanks again.
thank you very much. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Okay.